Hello and welcome to lecture number 13. We have been covering many concurrent assertion operators. So let's continue with the same thought process. In this lecture, we will cover AND, OR, and intersect operators. Let's look at the AND operator. Some of these could be quite intuitive. For an AND, both sides can be sequences, and an AND is considered to pass if this is important, both sequences start at the same time, and both must match because it's an and obviously the end point of each sequence can be different. So here in this particular example, both sequences must start at the same time, and when the longer sequence, because let's say we wait for sequence 1, and we need to make sure sequence 1 matches. We also need to make sure sequence 2 matches, and sequence 2 can be longer, or sequence 1 can be longer for that matter, as long as they both start at the same time and they both match, as they do here at this clock. For example, this sequence completes. Sequence 2 is a longer sequence. It completes at this clock and it passes. It could have completed here or here as well, and in either of those cases, the sequence will be considered to pass. And because it's an AND, the end time is the end time of either of the sequences, but obviously whichever matches last, because we need to wait for both sequences to end to see that they both remain true at the quote-unquote same time when they start at the same time. Let's take some examples. So here's a very simple property. Property AND S says that at passage of clock, if Z is true, then ABCDE should hold. ABCDE says that AB and CDE should hold. It's an AND of two sequences. AB sequence says that A must be followed by B within 5 clocks, but CDE says that C, 2 clocks later D, and 2 clocks later E must follow. So it's a very simple property. And if you look at this timing diagram, Z is true at this clock. And as the requirement says, both the sequences AB and CDE must start at the same time. So A is high and C is high. That means both sequences, A high and C high, both sequences will start at the same time, which is good. Then let's look at AB. A, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th clock, B arrives, which is exactly what we want. And then C, followed by 2 clocks later D, and 2 clocks later E arrives. So that also matches our requirement of CDE. And both the sequences meet their requirements, and hence the property passes at the end of the longer sequence. Let's look at this example, this timing diagram. Both A and C are high at the same time that Z is high. Nodes A and C need to be high at the same time as Z, not because of the requirement of the AND property, but because of the overlapping operator that is here. So A and CDE. CDE seems to meet its requirement of CDE, but B doesn't arrive for 5 clocks. And hence, it will fail at the end of the longer sequence because we wait for the long sequence. And if it doesn't match, it doesn't meet its requirement, then the AND will fail. It's rather intuitive. This is just to point out that you can do AND of expressions also, in addition to AND of sequences. And this is a very simple property. Z implies that A equal to B, or C equal to D. And obviously in this log, simulation log, you can see, and again this is an overlapping operator. So Z is 1, A and B are the same, C and D are the same, property passes. And here A and B are not the same, property fails. And here C and D are not the same, so property fails. So one more thing, you can do AND of expressions, AND of sequences, and you can also do AND of sequence or expressions or a combination of the two. So that's very useful where you can have a sequence, you want to AND it with an expression. Now let's look at intersect. Now intersect is sort of AND, but it has a requirement that just like in AND, both sequences must start at the same time. Both sequences must match, complete in their entirety. And the length of the two matching sequences must be the same. So in other words, you can also say, or the operator requires that both the sequences end at the same time. So here they start at the same time and they must end at the same time. In AND operator, that was not the requirement. In intersect, they, just as the name implies, they must intersect. That means they must start at the same time, end at the same time, and they both must match their requirement. So as you can see, if the sequences end at the same time, the property will pass. If not, if they end some different times, then the property will fail. So that's the main difference between AND and intersect. So here, basically, I'm showing the difference here. For intersect, they end at the same time, and they start at the same time, and they must end at the same time. If not, after the end time, if the end time is different, it will fail. While in AND, they start at the same time, but even if the end time is different, of sequence 2, for example, property will still pass as long as sequence 1 and sequence 2 are true, basically matches their property requirements. So that's basically the difference between the two. Then there is the OR operator. As the name suggests, either of the two sequences matches or are true, then the OR operator will pass. So here you have sequence 1 and sequence 2. If sequence 1 matches, then right there the property will pass and complete and will not care for sequence 2. And the reason I'm showing this is sequence 1 is shorter than sequence 2. So if sequence 1 ends here, again the property will pass at this clock and it will not care for, or it will not continue to check for sequence 2. In the AND operator, obviously, if sequence 1 matches, it's true. We will continue to look for sequence 2 to complete and be true because it's an AND. So let's look at some examples. It's exactly the same example as for AND, but here I'm using OR. So let's say Z arrives and then A starts at the same time because of the overlapping operator, and now it waits for B to come within 5 clocks, but B doesn't arrive. There is no B here. But C, now this is an important thing. C arrives 1 clock after A, and then it matches its requirements C, D, and E. But this property will fail. And this is again rehashing overlapping versus non-overlapping, and I want to make sure you don't confuse that with the OR, AND, or intersect operator. So the reason it fails here is that when Z was true, AB or CDE, both the sequence, meaning A and C, must occur at the same time as Z because of the overlapping operator. And we see that C did not start the same as Z. So even though it matches its property, the entire property ORS fails. And this is another example. Z arrives and then A arrives, and sure enough, B arrives 5 clocks later. And C also starts at the same time as Z because of the overlapping. It also matches its requirements. So as you notice, B arrives 5 clocks later, but since CDE matches its requirement, the property will pass right here. And then it won't care for whether B arrives or not. And again, you can have OR of expressions. Here also is the same thing, only that I have replaced AND with OR. So here, well, A equal to B, C equal to D, things will pass. A is not equal to B and C is not equal to E. So the OR of both sides of the OR are not true, it will fail. Here A is not equal to B, but C is equal to D, and so the property will pass. And then similarly here, similar situation. So it's OR and intersect are very intuitive operators, as I call them. They can both work on sequences, or they can all work on sequences or expressions, or a combination of the two. This is a very simple application that, as simple as it is, it's very useful. Property burst length restrict says that at pause edge of clock, disable if reset, burst length of 2 implies that write length can be 1 or 3 or 7 or 15. So here, as you can see, it's an OR of expressions, and then you assert the property. So it's a very simple application, but some of the simpler applications, if you pay attention, will be very useful in your project. This is a very short lecture, and we have looked at AND, OR, and intersect operators. Thank you for attending the lecture, and I'll see you soon in the next lecture.